Hi guys, welcome to this week's video. So this week's video is going to be about how I made Taiyo the Sunburst fox. So he has a resin head, ball and socket spine, and wire legs. So he's made out of a different type of faux fur. It's more wispy, I guess, and I added a little bit of white just to break it up a little bit. We've got the legs. He's got a sun marking and a moon marking on his body. The markings will be, the video will be on my Patreon, so you can check it out for my $5 and above tiers. But yeah, anyway, if you want to know how I made him, then just keep watching. Alright, so I'm starting off casting some parts in some resin. I'll be casting some glass eyes into this head, so if you want to learn how to do that, I have a tutorial in my shop at creaturesofnat.com, which you can purchase and find out how I do it. And this is what it looks like once everything's been cleaned up. And that's also included in the tutorial. So when that's all done, I prime my resin pieces and get it ready for painting, and then I'll go ahead and paint all of the bits that need painting in just a water-based acrylic paint, nothing special. You can get anything from your local craft store. I used the brand Chromacryl. It's relatively cheap, and I like the consistency of the paints. So as with all my creatures, I have a little backstory. So this is Taiyo's the Sunburst fox backstory. Sunburst foxes are incredibly bright creatures, so much so that the regular human cannot look at it. Their fur glows with a ripple-like effect, almost like the sun's surface. These foxes have been depicted in ancient tablets, usually stating that they are the disciples of the sun goddess Amaterasu. They also reside in a small area between the Sun Village and Golden Point in the Yellow Tribal Lands Maho. So that's his little backstory. Moving on to the feet, and the same process as the head, and I'm painting in the resin using the same Chromacryl acrylic paint, and this time just in black. You don't have to be neat or anything because we're going to be covering it with fur anyway. And now that that's all painted, I'm going to leave that to dry overnight, and I can start working on the fur body. So I'm using a different type of faux fur this time. It's got a different texture, but same process anyway. Is I'm drawing out the patterns on the back of the faux fur using patterns that I've made. I do want to make a pattern video that'll probably be for my Patreon only tiers, but I will do it and I'll let everybody know in the future. So this is a little look at what the fur actually looks like. It's kind of like a strawy, wispy sort of fur. It's really great for using it for fire, just because it's got that wild sort of wispy look to it. I've used it a few times before and I'm coming up to running out of it, so I thought this would be a good creature to make from this fur. So I'm using a small pair of scissors where I can feed it in between the pile and only cut the backing. I prefer to use small scissors. You can use whatever scissors that you like. I have a post on my Patreon if you want to know a little bit more about it, but I like to use small scissors just so I have better control of getting the blades in between the pile. So once it's all cut out, I'm going to pin it all together and sew it up on a sewing machine. And this little fox has a white chin sort of area, so I cut that out separately and I sewed it up. And my sewing machine's nothing fancy, it's just a brother sewing machine, and it's maybe 10 to 15 years old. But it works fine. You just got to be careful with the thickness of your faux fur, just to be mindful not to sort of rush through it because it can snap the needle. So just take it slow, there's no rush, but it's so much faster than hand sewing things. You will have to hand sew bits and pieces anyway, because you need to flip the body the right way around, so you'll need to hand sew the back of it up, so there's no escaping hand sewing. So So here's a little look at the body once it's been sewn up. You can see what I have actually sewn up. So I've left the legs open, the neck area obviously, and the back end so I can flip it the right way around. The neck will be attached to the resin piece, so there's no need to sew that up, and I leave the legs open just to give it a bit more room to feed the fabric through. And I like to leave it open because it gets a bit too difficult to feed it through. I like to use a blunt wooden tool to help sort of feed it through. Don't use a metal tool because you'll end up ripping the backing of the fur and having to sew up that rip anyway. So this is what we have once it's been flipped the right way around. So you can see it's starting to actually take shape. It does definitely need a trim, but I'm going to go ahead and make the armature. I have a tutorial in my shop. If you want to know how to make wire armatures, you can head over there. But in the meantime, I had an idea to test out just some patterns on the fabric. I used a purple color. I didn't really like the way it turned out, but I did a illustration of what I wanted this fox to look like, but turns out I didn't like it anyway, so that illustration is available as a printable if you're interested in my shop at creaturesandnat.com. And moving on, once I've made that armature, I go ahead and attach that faux fur to the resin around the neck, just so I have like a base that I can that's sturdy and yeah. So I leave that to dry overnight just to make sure it's a strong base. And once that's all dry, I go ahead and I can start sewing everything up. So I start sewing up the leg areas, and I'll add some polyfill. I have a video on what I add in my dolls if you're interested in that. It's on my channel. But I use a ladder stitch to sew all of the ends up, and that's the best stitch that I've come across that works for this because it hides the seam. It works quite well with strength. Once I've set it all up, I can attach that to the resin using a tacky fabric glue, the same as the neck. And I just get it from a local store here called Spotlight, but you can get it from any craft store. It's nothing special. But I usually leave it to dry overnight again, just so it's adhered properly and is strong. And once that's done, go ahead and sew up the back end. This takes a little while. It usually takes me an afternoon to sew up, to finish sewing the entire doll. I hate hand sewing, but that's just what you have to do. And then I can add the tail onto the armature. So this fox has a ball and socket armature spine, and it has wire legs. Just because I like the way the wire legs look a little bit better. You can make it a little bit thinner, whereas the ball and socket needs to be a little bit thicker. So this is what we have once it's all been sewn up. Definitely needs a trim. So once we've trimmed it, this is what we have. You can see how it's taken shape of a fox. I will have a trimming video that will be on my Patreon very soon. I'm working on it. So once we're at this stage, we can start applying the fur to the face. I'm only showing a little snippet here because I haven't decided if I'm going to make a tutorial on it yet. But just try a few different things and you'll come up with a technique that works for you and something that you're comfortable with. But once that's applied, this is what we have, and I can give it a little trim to make it actually look like a fox, not some fluffy thing. So I use a range of different tools to trim it, including small scissors in that area that's a bit hard. Once that's done, I can go and add any little details that I want to add. So I usually go over the painted areas with some more paint just to refine it a little bit more, because some details do get lost in the furring process. Moving on, so what I'm doing now is I'm just using a little tool to get the pile of the fur out of the seam. And if you want to know how I added any markings to this fox, I will have a video on my Patreon that you can check out for my $5 and up tiers. The link will be in the description box down below. So just further going ahead and adding some more markings, but like I said, it will be in the video on my Patreon. I also have a video on my Patreon about whiskers and what I use for whiskers and what you can use, and that is also on there, available for $5 and up tiers. So this little one will be available in my shop at creaturesofnat.com. Payment plans are welcome, just shoot me a message and we can work something out. But in the meantime, thank you for watching. You can check me out on Instagram and Facebook at Creatures of Nat, and thank you everyone for supporting me for another month on Patreon. I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate it if you even considered it anyway. But I'll catch you in the next one, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Bye!